Let's start our overview of portfolio governance and roles with the theme that runs through the book of change the business versus run the business, and look at how the governance is applied to that. So on the one side of the equation, we've got change the business, which is looking at the strategic objectives about what that organisation needs to do to survive and flourish in the environment it's operating in. And then we've got run the business, which is delivering the services to customers or the manufacturing or whatever it is it does at the most optimal performance level with the capability that it's got. So we've got the preparing, looking into the future and saying these are the things that need to happen. And then we've got running the business, which is we need to survive and deliver today. Okay, so if we look at that and then we look at the two governance bodies that MoP has come up with. Firstly, we've got Portfolio Direction Group. Now, they're the ones who are owning the overarching strategic direction. And if you have a look at what the book says, it's pretty much talking about the board level people, the chief exec or the managing director. And up there, we've got the change director representing the portfolio and the things that need to happen. On the other side of the equation, we've got run the business. Now we've got the Portfolio Progress Group, which is a lower organisation to the Direction one, but the Portfolio Progress Group is managing the building of the capability to deliver it into the business and then the management of the business performance, so it embraces and exploits that capability as it arrives. And I think, at this point we need to say the portfolio governance model is not really the most all-encompassing thing we've ever seen, is it? There's two boards and hardly any roles really identified in them. So you need to, if you're thinking about employing this stuff, you need to really stand back and think about what's going on. One does direction, whilst the progress one is tracking implementation in effect, and how it works. So let's just have a little look about how these fit together. Firstly, the Portfolio Direction Board is sat at the top tier. If we look at the members of it, it's clearly a subset, if not the entire strategic board of the organisation. But this is the one that's setting the direction, and fundamentally that's embedded in your business plan. Then below that, we have the Portfolio Progress Group. Now, an interesting thing about these two groups is the regularity that they meet. So at the Portfolio Direction Group doesn't need to meet weekly, monthly or anything like that. The direction of the portfolio will not be changing. And we've seen clients where this one really only sits there once a year, with a strategic planning, or maybe quarterly or 6 monthly. But you really don't want it meeting more than quarterly because the portfolio doesn't need decisions around direction. So what happens? The portfolio board starts to poke its oar into the Portfolio Progress Group. Now, the Portfolio Progress Group is what you might be calling your portfolio boards or your delivery board, because these are the guys that meet on a monthly basis, tracking progress, looking at what's going on in the projects and programs, looking at the business operations and looking at whether we're seeing those benefits arrive. And so then we start to see the two sides of the equation again. We've got the delivery teams, which is your PPM crew, program project managers and all those people in the program offices. And then we've got the operational teams, the people who are actually doing the business at the moment. Now, interestingly, for those of you that know about MSP, what we're seeing in the delivery teams and the operational teams is not a real million miles from the two sides of the MSP coin. We've got the BCM on one side and the program manager on the other. But let's just think about the director of change at the moment. So there's an individual that sits on both boards. So the director of change has to wear many hats. So he sits on the portfolio board, and at the portfolio board, he or she is probably taking direction from the senior directors on where they want this portfolio to go, helping with prioritization, helping with making sure you've got the resource, reinforcing the plan, all those kind of things that we think about when we're thinking strategic direction. Of course, a big element of that will be looking at risks in the external environment. that then feeds down into the portfolio progress group. Now, if you look at the MSP model, it's not a million miles from this either. So at the top level, you've got the sponsoring group, and then the progress portfolio is basically the program board. And what we're calling the director of change in the MoP model is the same as, in effect, the SRO is doing in the MSP model. The thing about program and difference between portfolio and program management is, for the MSP manual, we were able to actually set up a model that could sit in isolation in a way from the rest of the organization. The problem with portfolio management is you can't do that. It has to interface with what's going on. All right, so then MOPs identified two roles. That's the portfolio manager, and when we're looking in that role about keeping the integrity of the portfolio together and basically being the day-to-day sidekick of the director of change, doing all the stuff to keep the portfolio rolling along. And I've put it on the left-hand side of that diagram because they've got a particular focus, because they need to keep the integrity of the program and portfolio side of the business. So they're probably coming from that area in terms of their speciality. And then the other role it picks up on is the role of portfolio benefits manager, which one could stand back and say, well, why have they just picked on that role? Well, actually, I'm going to kind of put it to you this way, that's the side of this equation that's looking at the operational teams. So the word that the portfolio people have used is benefits manager, because obviously it's about making sure you get the performance improvements out of the business change. So absolutely a really valid role. But the other option could have been change manager, I guess. The other thing to think about is, would you have one benefits manager? I would question that. Very similar to the MSP BCM, you'd probably have a benefits manager interfacing to each of the operational teams that are engaging with the portfolio. So you could have manufacturing, you could have HR, you could have or HR and people stuff, you could have development. Each one of those could be producing benefits in their own right. So think about whether your organisation needs multiple benefits managers, particularly where those benefits are running across a number of operational areas. And as we've said in some of the other presentations to you, a lot of the portfolio MOP stuff is quite abstract. So you really need to think quite carefully about how you deploy these roles. Now, the other interesting thing is, for me, when I'm looking at this, is you've got the delivery practices, of which there are 7, but we've only really identified one role to go with them. So we've got the delivery practices, which are risk management, resource management, finance management, benefits management, governance and controls, and stakeholder. It's a bit surprising that they didn't say, well, we'll have a kind of head of each one of those, or a key subject matter expert in the group at the portfolio progress board talking about those things. So I think we should see that portfolio benefits manager as the operational interface into the portfolio board. All right, so hopefully that explains it. For those of you with MSP, I think it kind of hangs together quite neatly if you stand back and think, well, what did MSP say about this? Because it definitely looks like they've interpreted some of it for portfolio. And just to reinforce this, the last point, portfolio direction board, you don't want them really, certainly once the portfolio is rolling, meeting too often, because they'll start interfering with a progress group. Equally, the progress group starts meeting too regularly, it will start putting its finger in the delivery and the operational team's pies. So about the way they schedule. The one exception I would say to that is if you've got a portfolio that is going through definition, then you may well have the portfolio direction group meeting more often as it tries to build those foundations of what needs to be delivered in the future. Okay, I hope you enjoy the rest of the course.